Ted, snap out of it, man. What's going on?
Back off, Dave. I'm negotiating a difficult contract.
Come on, Ted. Put down that great old one idol and save your soul. And let's just shoot a D&D video.
Souls are so overrated.
Well, Ted, if you are determined to go down this path, we might as well talk about D&D go-to spells for Tier 2 Warlock for 5e D&D, because you're going to need to know these. Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and as usual, I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
Maybe it's your first time visiting Ted's Basement. It's a place where we like to discuss news, views, and homebrews for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, and sometimes we even like to talk about other role-playing games.
So if you don't want to miss a single video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and attune to that notification bell.
Before we jump into our regular video and talk about go-to spells for Tier 2 for the Warlock, we've got 5 of them. We have our normal way of going through this. Let's insert our normally scheduled commercial, and that is for the Nerdarchy Pledge Manager. That's right, Out of the Box Encounters was a huge success on Kickstarter, but a lot of people missed it. They didn't know about it. They were living under a rock. I don't know how they missed it, but they did, and they were like, hey, Nerdarchy, can we still get this? Well, you can. We have a late pledge. You can sign up for it. There's going to be a link in the description down below. You can go over there. We even have a free download you can check out by setting up a free account through the Pledge Manager. I know some people are really angry with Kickstarter right now. Don't worry, our Pledge Manager has actually nothing to do with Kickstarter anymore. I mean, we're going to send you to a Kickstarter page, but when you actually go to the Pledge Manager, that's actually a whole different website. It's our own thing. Like we said, you can get an exclusive encounter that's only over there through the free account. And also we're pre-selling Nerdarchy the Convention badges, which you can find in there as well as all the other great add-ons and exclusive offers we did through Kickstarter.
And you're going to be able to get it at the same rate as what we were offering during the Kickstarter. Once that Pledge Manager closes, all the prices are going to go up. The things that were exclusive for the Kickstarter are going to be gone, never to be seen from again. So if you missed it and you want to get in on it, now is the time. Carpe diem.
In the description, check that out. But 5 go-to Warlock spells for Tier 2. What is Tier 2, Ted?
So Tier 2 is 5th through 10th level for the Warlock, and we're looking at 3rd, 4th, and 5th level spells. And we're going to talk about, our 5, go-to spells for a variety of different types. And with each class, you have to look at, what is the avenue of research? Why are we choosing these type of spells? So you had certain criteria that you were looking for when we were doing this research as to what spells we should dive into. So why don't you share that?
All right. For the Warlock, I feel like it's very important that it's not a one-and-done spell. So instantaneous cast durations are really bad for the Warlock. They get very limited casting. So when you do cast, you want it to stay around and be able to use it for a while. So duration is important. And the other thing, when a Warlock casts a spell, it's always cast at the maximum level that they can cast. So I also feel that it's really important to have spells that scale so that you can get the most out of that spell. So those are the criteria I was looking at. As Ted said, we're going to do our 5 categories, and we have 1 bonus. So it's actually 6 spells. We do attack, buff, defense, overlooked, utility,
iconic.
And iconic. So with that, we're going to jump in it. I'm going to start things off with our attack spell, and that is Vampiric Touch. It's a 3rd level. It's 1 action to cast. Range is self, verbal, somatic. Duration 1 minute, and it's a necromancy spell. A necrotic effect, and it is a melee attack. The touch of your shadow-wreathed hand can siphon life force from others to heal your wounds. Make a melee spell attack against a creature within your reach. On a hit, the target takes 3d6 necrotic damage, and you regain hit points equal to half the amount of necrotic damage dealt. Until the spell ends, you can make the attack again on each of your turns as an action. At higher levels, when you cast a spell using a spell slot of 4th level or higher, the damage increases by a die 6 for each slot level above 3rd. So that's going to max out at 5 die 6. So you're also going to be healing and doing damage and a minute. So that's going to last a round. A full combat pretty much.
Really good spell, and it definitely meets the criteria that you set forth. For our buff, there's not a whole lot of buffing spells that exist in the Warlock spell list, especially in, this particular, tier of magic. So we actually are selected something that we're labeling as a debuff, and for that it's going to be Elemental Bane. 4th level, range area is 90 feet, duration, concentration up to a minute. It's a con save, casting time is an action with a verbal somatic component. It is transmutation, and the damage effect is acid. Choose one creature you can see within range and choose one of the following damage types: acid, cold, fire, or lightning, or thunder. So it's actually more than one. The target must succeed on a constitution saving throw or be affected by the spell for its duration. The first time each turn the affected target takes damage of the chosen type, the target takes an extra 2d6 damage of that type. Moreover, the target loses any resistance to that damage type until the spell ends. At higher level, when you cast a spell using a spell slot of 5th or higher, you can target one additional creature for each spell slot above 4th. The creature must be within 30 feet of each other when you target them. So technically, you could piggyback off of somebody else. If one target is 90 feet away and the other one is 120 feet away, but within 30 of that first target, that still technically meets the criteria because it doesn't say both of them have to be in there. It does have the scalable effect of, hitting multiple targets, which I really like. You've got the ability to remove resistance, which can be really helpful, especially if you've got, a caster in the party who is prone to using a particular type. You could be like, all right, well, my fire mage is really going to be my friend, and I'm going to remove, the fire resistance from these creatures, and you can have a lot of fun with it.
While it is technically a debuff, I see it as buffing the other party members that are using elemental spells. So, if you're fighting a creature that has resistance, getting to remove it is super helpful. And then anyone in your party that's a caster that is using those types of damage can then, use it against it. You get a little bit of extra damage. So I think it works really nicely.
Yeah, it's a fun spell and definitely has its uses.
So next up, we have our defensive spell. And with that, it's going to be a 3rd level spell, counter spell. It's a reaction to cast, range 60 foot, somatic component, duration is instantaneous, school abjuration, and you attempt to interrupt a creature in the process of casting a spell. If the creature is casting a spell of 3rd level or lower, the spell fails and has no effect. If it's casting a spell of 4th level or higher, make an ability check using your spell casting ability. The DC equals 10 plus your spell's level. On a success, the creature spell fails and has no effect. Higher level, you can cast the spell using a spell slot of 4th level or higher. The interrupt the spell has no effect if it is a level of less than or equal to the level of the spell slot you used. Just like the buff spells, Warlocks do not have many defensive spells, so there were only a couple choices, and counter spell wins just because it's a spell that automatically will scale, and having counter spell automatically scale is really nice. Granted, it's really hard for the Warlock because they has those limited uses of slots. But you know what? This could be super impactful at the right moment.
Counterspell is really good. And, I've seen it be wildly successful from both sides of the GM screen. Whether the GM is countering a spell the players use or the players are countering a spell that the GM is using. It has a lot of fun. And as Dave says, the fact that this is scaling, the fact that it's automatically bumping up while the Warlock gets those higher tier spells, super useful to just be like, oh, well, you know what? I'm using a fifth level counter spell because that's all I can. So next we're going to move into our iconic spell, and we actually have, 2 different ones here that we're going to talk about. I'll talk about the first, Dave will talk about the second. And, when we talk about iconic, it means, what spells really, reach out and mean this is for that class. There's not a huge amount of Warlock only spells, and there's not a long duration that the Warlock has been around. So it hasn't had like the wizard casting Fireball, from the very beginning. So we actually have a little bit of a problem with the ones that we're gonna talk about, and we'll get to that in a minute. So I've got Hunger of Hadar, 3rd level. It's 150 foot range with a 20 foot radius sphere. Concentration for a minute is your duration. It's a dex save. Casting time is an action with verbal, somatic, and material. It's conjuration, and you've got a bit of a damage effect. You can open a gateway to the dark between the stars, a region infested with unknown horrors. A 20-foot radius sphere of blackness and bitter cold appears centered on a point within range and lasting for the duration. This void is filled with a cacophony of soft whispers and slurping noises that can be heard up to 30 feet away. No light, magical or otherwise, can illuminate the area, and creatures within the area are blinded. The void creates a warp in the fabric of space, and the area is difficult terrain. Any creature that starts its turn in the area takes 2d6 cold damage. Any creature that ends its turn in the area must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or take 2d6 acid damage as milky otherworldly tentacles rub against it. So it has a duration, so it is going to last. So that fulfills one of the criteria, but it does not scale. It does have a little bit of a control factor built in. It does have a damage factor built into it. It is darkness, so it does kind of, work along with the angle of, the warlock who can see through darkness, but it doesn't say that you're immune to these abilities too, so you don't want to stand in this one.
No, that is true. Devil Sight will work. So if you're using Eldritch Blast with the Repelling Blast, you can use it as a control effect, or even the one that actually has the pulling. So it does kind of work nicely in that. But like you said, there's no scaling. It does have a duration. And it is a Warlock-only spell. So that's what makes it iconic. Here's another Warlock-only spell, Shadow of Moil. It's a 4th level spell, action to cast, range itself. Verbal somatic material lasts a minute, necromancy, and the damage type is necrotic. Flame-like shadows wreathe your body until the spell ends, causing you to become heavily obscured to others. The shadows turn dim light within 10 feet of you into darkness, and bright light in the same area to light. Until the spell ends, you have resistance to radiant damage. In addition, whenever a creature within 10 feet of you hits you with an attack, the shadows lash out at that creature, dealing 2d8 necrotic damage. You might get concealment out of this, which was really good. If you happen to be in dim light, it becomes even better. If you have Devil Sight, it's even better because you can see through it and it won't affect you. Resistance to radiant damage, whatever. I mean, it doesn't come up very often, so that is not that great. If things attack you, then they're going to take necrotic damage, which is kind of good.
It's going to be awesome if you're up against, the laser monk, the Sun Soul.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's when I see resistant to radiant damage, I'm like, so yes, it's going to be really good if you're fighting other player characters, maybe. I mean, there's some circumstances where it would definitely come into play. But that being said, for our iconic choices, they're not bad spells. They're decent spells. But the Warlock as a whole, as a spellcaster, is slightly problematic. So you get limited uses, and their concentration spells, along with, which is a lot of their duration spells, which interferes with, one of their other really iconic spells, which is Hex.
Yes.
So depending on how you want to play them, all these things are going to factor in. But for iconic, for this tier, those two just fit the bill.
Yeah. For our utility spell, we're going to be looking at Fly. 3rd level, range, touch, concentration is the duration for up to 10 minutes. Casting time is an action, verbal somatic material. It is transmutation, and the effect is movement, as you would expect, or as you probably already know. You touch a willing creature. The target gains a flying speed of 60 for the duration. When the spell ends, the target falls if it is still aloft, unless it can stop the fall. At higher levels, when you cast a spell using a spell slot of 4th or higher, you can target one additional creature for each spell slot above 3rd. So the useful thing here is the fact that you're getting a fly speed of 60. All the difficult terrain type things that you might be having to deal with, you're flying. You can ignore all of that stuff. A fly speed of 60, means that you're going to basically be able to move faster. So you need to get somewhere quickly. This is a way to do it. Your spell slot is going to max out at 5th, which means when you cast the spell, you're actually going to get up to 3 creatures, and it doesn't have to be yourself. It's got concentration. It's going to last. So you've really got the ability to cover some significant distance quickly with a single casting of this spell.
Yeah, we felt like it was going to be really useful for that reason. And with the Warlock getting those max casts, that's super helpful. Matter of fact, this pushed Fly up in its usefulness for us, as to with other casters, it did not. So that was a factor. Now, overlooked, we're going to go with Charm Monster. And actually, this one is really good for several reasons. It's a 4th level spell. Casting time is 1 action, range 30 feet, verbal somatic, duration 1 hour. No little C in D&D Beyond here, which means that's not a concentration. It's enchantment. It's a wisdom save charm effect. You attempt to charm a creature you can see within range. It must make a wisdom saving throw, and it does so with advantage if you or your companions are fighting it. If it fails a saving throw, it's charmed by you until the spell ends or until you or your companions do anything harmful to it. The charmed creature is friendly to you. When the spell ends, the creature knows it was charmed by you. Higher levels. When you cast a spell using a spell slot of 5th level or higher, you can target 1 additional creature for each slot above 4th level. The creatures must be within 30 feet of each other when you target them. Again, like Ted said, that can get you out to 60 feet if you piggyback. You can get up to 2 creatures. You wanna act first as your warlock casts this before the fighting starts. And maybe you can have 2 of the monsters and now they become your allies. It's going to last an hour. You don't have to concentrate on this spell, so you can hex and use Eldritch Blast to your heart's content while you have have these monsters as your allies as well, helping you fight the other monsters. So for those reasons, I think this is a spell that if you're a warlock of tier 2, you shouldn't sleep on.
I have to agree. There's definitely a lot of different ways that you can be able to use that. Whether you want to charm monsters and turn them into your mounts for, half hour, 40 minutes, and then send it off that way while you keep going on. Whether you want to, as Dave says, steal them for the battle, have them fight on your side, and, be able to, use their attacks against its allies. You can have a lot of fun with it.
Role-playing, negotiations, interrogations. So yeah, it almost becomes like a control/utility spell with a lot of versatility. So for those reasons, I think it's a great spell. But what do you think? We got a place where we can discuss it down in the comments below. Before we head on out, let me take a moment to invite you to join Nerdarchy the Adventuring Party. What can I expect over there, Ted?
On Patreon, we're creating products for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons that both players and DMs alike can drop right into their game.
But that's not all. We do monthly giveaways and our patrons are automatically entered.
We do weekly hangouts with our patrons and more.
So quest on down to the description, join the Nerdarchy Adventuring Party on Patreon, and until next time,
stay nerdy.